Hello there everyone, this is hopefully going to be a video that goes over pretty much most of the detail that anybody would need to perform an AUX mod on the original stereo for their... I should have done the research prior to this video, but I don't know if it's the same stereo that you would find in the 93 to 95 Jeep Grand Cherokee. I don't believe so. But this is in the 96 to 98 for sure, because it's in my 98 Jeep Grand Cherokee out there. And this stereo is actually shared between a lot of different Dodge and Chrysler vehicles at the time. I believe I got most of the information. It's on a ZJ forum, but the guy pointed to another post from a Dodge Dakota forum of somebody performing this mod, and I believe that's, you know, that's obviously the Dakota shares the stereo with the ZJ, so that's where we got the information for this mod. But I'm doing it in a video format because that will give people kind of a visual illustration of what you can expect as far as performing this mod and how difficult it is and whether or not you'd like to perform it yourself if you deem it worthwhile. So this is going to be mostly for the 5.9 people, but also for anybody who is interested in kind of the more purist approach, wants the original stereo in their ZJ, and still wants the ability to have an AUX port or AUX input, because I have a little, like for the Bluetooth thing, I just have a USB Bluetooth device plugged into my cigarette lighter all the time, and it connects to my phone, and then it has an AUX output from it that goes into the AUX input that I've modded into the stereo. And so obviously I have Bluetooth music to my original ZJ stereo, which is quite nice. I'll go over the supplies you'll need. I have this pretty cool kit that I got from one of my family members for Christmas. I used to repair laptops a lot. I still tinker with stuff from time to time, but this is what this is for. It's just a bunch of tips. I'm gonna be using this, obviously. And it's a little motorized screwdriver that you can use manually as well, and has a little flashlight. And then the wire to go from the AUX input to inside the stereo, where we'll be soldering to 3 traces. And then I just have this to get all the screws off quickly. Electric tape to wrap the whole thing up when you're done. Some solder and a soldering iron. I just have a cruddy welder here because I'm cheap. And then this, if you haven't already spliced the ends. A pointed tip would be the way to go. I'm really not a professional when it comes to soldering electronics, so don't quote me on anything really. What we're gonna do first though is we're gonna take this to my Jeep out in the garage, and we're going to verify that it works. So I've already undone where the stereo goes in. You will have to plug in both these, I mean, if you want to hear the sound, but I'm pretty sure there's also like a ground thing. Yeah, you can hear it flickering because, you know, Chrysler electronics don't like bad grounds. And then plug that. That is the ground right there. Well, it's one of the grounds anyways, so I mean the whole thing won't be happy if you miss that. But the rest of the stuff doesn't need to be plugged in. There's like a little 2-pin back here. There's this for the antenna. You don't have to worry about all that. Just plug in those 3 harnesses and you should be able to operate the stereo and hear audio. So you see it turns on just fine. Power, FM. There's not going to be any presets set, I believe. Oh, okay. I'm sure you can faintly hear radio, but because I didn't plug the antenna in, it's not going to get a good signal. It's clear that the radio and stereo thing works. AM/FM works, and the speakers obviously work. So now we're going to go ahead and remove this. I have this flashlight just in case I need it. So now let's go ahead and get started with the mod. So I know we're already like partly into the video and you've already spent your time on it, but fair warning, you're basically going to be taking it almost completely apart. It's not, I would say, difficult, but if you haven't done anything like this before, I would exercise a lot of caution and make sure that you are very careful with where you store the screws and organize them, because it's all mostly the same screws except for these 4 that hold the plastic bit on the front, and some of these that go into the heatsink are way longer and have to go back into those specific holes. So you do have to be a little bit attentive to how you take it apart, because putting it back together, there's also like these parts where you have to push it on just right so that it meshes, and like if you put it back together wrong, it's going to not be neat. It'll be messed up. It may still work, but Anyways, yeah, so obviously you can just watch if you're not sure and get an idea from there if you're actually confident as to whether or not you can undertake the mod. I would say, as someone who has repaired laptops a lot in the past, it is moderately difficult, but most of that is in just reassembling it after you soldered it and the actual soldering job, because for an amateur person who doesn't solder stuff every day, it's quite a small trace. So it's not necessary, but I have tweezers to get, you know, these more inaccessible ones. See, that's one of the long ones I was talking about. It's longer. And it's just with the heatsink. Pretty much all the rest of the screws are like this. Just the same kind of head, but with much less length. It appears to be a little bit less than half. And again, I'm just using my drill to get them out, not using it to put them back together. Because, yeah, that you gotta be careful about. You don't want to lose any of these. I'm keeping all the long ones together. I always do the heatsink first because, I mean, it's one of the last things you can put on too, and that way you know that that's where the longer ones go. So you'll basically be taking, I gotta be careful holding it like that because you're actually bending the joystick that does the fade and balance left and right. In fact, I really should figure out a different way to do this. I'll just kind of, yeah, there we go, the heatsink comes right out. This is troublesome because I'm really afraid one of the tabs on the bottom, as you probably noticed, is already broken. But that's essentially what we're doing is, right now we're just, okay, so this I forgot. You have to remove these three little, one just popped back on, but that's fair enough because I forgot this. And then you have to pull the volume knob off. It doesn't look like you have to, but there's a plastic clear, you know, when the LEDs come on and the green aluminum shroud comes around the volume knob, that sort of clear plastic is behind there, and it'll grab the volume knob if you don't remove it first. That's right, this came back on. I'm trying to be careful with this. I say that and then that happens. And there's the front of the radio with the cover taken off. And we will be removing this too. So let me go ahead and do that. So little plastic plugs, which is very similar to how daughter boards and laptops work. That's how this plugs into like the circuit boards that are behind it and all that. There's this little piece of metal that kind of grips this down, so you have to, yeah, there we go. Because there's a plug right here and here. So as you lift it, it may have some tension, but just lift a little bit firmly, but gently, and it should pivot outwards like that and then come completely out. And then I'm going to continue with all these screws, lots of screws. That, yes. So these hold the CD player in. Actually, did I? Yeah, I did. Okay, so this can come off actually. This is one of those things that may be a bit tough and why you would want something that you can pry with. Something that you can gently pry with, because as you can see, it's meshed onto, like it's grabbing onto that. So that's what you're trying to lift off. Nice. There we go. So that's the top cover. That's done. Not covering anything I'll need later, right? Yeah. CD player, that can actually come out next. The only thing that the CD player is connected to the main body of the radio with is a ribbon cable. So there's these two screws. You may need, actually, I'll go ahead and use this. I'll be able to see what I'm doing a lot better. But these two screws, and then the two on the back, yeah, I haven't undone those yet. Those are what hold the CD player in. So now the whole unit should be able to lift straight up and out and have it forward a little bit because it's connected by this ribbon cable. We're just going to gently slide it out. And that is the CD player. So the actual traces that we're soldering onto is beneath here. I'll have to look up the reference, but I believe it's this harness right here. Pretty sure that's where the traces are on the opposite side, so we will have to get the cassette deck out. That's well, this we can get out next, right here, because we've unscrewed all those. Well, actually, no, this is still screwed in. This little aluminum, I believe it's aluminum, this comes out as well. It's just a little piece that surrounds the antenna. I think it's just another heat sink. There. You can see it's coming out of that little plug right there. There we go. Antenna module, or radio module, I don't know what you would call that. Okay, so this ribbon cable goes to the cassette deck underneath, and that's what this little hole is. That hole actually goes into that little input that this was actually plugged into. So now we're going to remove the bottom cover and remove the cassette deck. And be quite careful because you can see it's a little bit flimsy now. And we're trying to keep everything together best we can until we get to where we need to solder. There we go. Oh, it's plugged in. All right, so this is where we have to be careful a little bit. This just lifts off. Like that's fine for the PCB to just lift off of this connector here, but this right here is plugged into the cassette deck board and we have to remove it. So I'm just gonna slightly wiggle it and be careful. So there is our cassette assembly and a chunk of the power supply, it looks like. Okay, that is separate, so this is unrelated. This is pretty much just power supply. So that's the bottom and the cassette deck. And now we are where we need to be. This right here is where we will be soldering to. So this far left pin that actually goes into the pin right here for this PCB, I don't know what that is, probably some part of the radio that controls everything. This is the ground. This pin, the second pin from the left, is your right, stereo right. And then this, pin 3, is stereo left. Do your best to keep that in mind. Ground, right, left. All right, everybody, I've finished all the soldering. I went ahead and just spared you guys all that because, again, as I mentioned, I'm not a professional. It's good enough to get the mod done, and I would definitely look into some soldering videos or something if you would like to know how to solder properly. But that said, I don't want to say, like, if you aren't like a professional solderer or do soldering on the regular, don't attempt this mod. I mean, if you believe to some extent that you can get it done and get it done in a way that you know it'll work, I mean, give it a shot. The worst thing that happens is you ruin this and you have to go to pick and pull and get another one. So, just again, as I iterated before, white is ground, blue is right, and red is left. And you also want to just make sure that the way you soldered it, nothing is bridging. And it's a good idea to shine a bright light like this and just make sure of that. And this is the soldering job on the AUX port thing. Left and then right. And how I kind of went about it in my mind is that the right are the two traces that are fairly close to each other on the pins on the bottom here, and the lefts are kind of spread out. So these two are left, these two are right. I believe that these unused ones are bridged to the ones that I did solder to, but I'm not sure. It's just the wiring diagram seems to say that. So I've just soldered to the same ones that I soldered on my original stereo just to be safe. But just make sure that, again, that the connections are solid and that obviously you're gonna be wrapping this all up in electric tape when you're done to isolate everything and make sure it's all sturdy. But and these aux ports, so in case you're not aware, this thing threads off, and the idea is that if you drill a hole just big enough to you know, pop this in, it comes out, and then you can thread this on the outside to kind of lock nut it, and then that will obviously just be the plastic surface or whatever that you've drilled through, and then that tightens and locks that in so that all that shows on the outside is an aux port. So that's pretty cool, pretty dandy. I'm also going to just do one last electric tape right over everything to further isolate it. And now there's going to be another piece of electric tape, and I mean, this is going to be just a little bit, all right, we're not going to obviously reassemble it completely just yet. I'm just trying to get an idea of exactly the clearances I'll have to work with. I'm pretty sure that is the orientation that it goes in. Yeah, because that harness is right there and it plugs in like so. And so this little space right here, we do have clearance to kind of anchor down the aux cable a bit better so that this doesn't get disturbed as much from vibrations. Make sure I didn't tape over anything important on this side either. But there we go. So now that's anchored, and it'll probably come up and out like that. Out of the, and then we've got that link for you to install the aux cord however you wish. So now we're just going to get restarted on assembly. We're going to start with the cassette deck. This is probably going to be the most tricky. Everything else is pretty much just knowing where it all goes, but this, you have this power cable right here, which you'll have to just be really tricky about how you, I mean, obviously you can plug it in before you completely seat the cassette deck back in its original position, and then you have this connector to worry about, which you have to be very careful not to bend or dismantle. Just be very wary of that. And then you've got the ribbon cable that plugs into here, which goes through that hole. So obviously that, when I flip it over, will be seated right there. So let's go ahead and get started. May need some needle nose pliers, but this should be fine. All right, so let's see if there's any chance I can get my fingers in there. Press the connector down, make sure it's firmly seated without putting too much slack on it. Yeah, I think it's about as in there as it'll go. All right, so this is the next tricky bit. Lining this up while also lining these up, because these mesh together and overlap right there. That meshes into there, and that overlaps right there. So lining those up first probably is a good idea. Oh, I gotta be careful of that. Making sure that's lined up where it needs to be, and these are all lined up where they need to be, and then just go ahead and sandwich it together. And make sure that they are lined up and that it is feeding into the contacts. Little click of these tabs interfacing correctly into that. Obviously that'll just hold that exactly where it needs to be, and then you won't have to worry about it. But for now we're just going to have to take extra care. And then put that. Probably a good idea to take this ribbon cable out of there and then plug it into, and then that, you shouldn't need to like push it in any further than just below the, I'm pretty sure that's why they designed it like that, is so that is how you know that it's fed into where it will work. And then you can feed this into there, and obviously you can see much more easily, yeah, that one's in. So now that ribbon cable is taken care of, we can, I believe it's the radio module, the antenna module that we uninstalled in this order. And this is what I want to do next anyways, because this will secure the wire going to the aux mod. I believe the circuit board comes in like that, so you put it on this way first and then you pivot it in. Yeah, because the circuit board doesn't really, it's not really on the back side. Oh yeah, that's a problem. Put that in first. Ah, okay, so the cable's going to come through here, kind of come out this way. So that'll crimp it pretty well. Not crimp, sorry, just kind of secure it to make sure it's not slacked. On the inside, it'll just kind of, well no, it'll be slacked. Is the harness lined up? Yeah, harness is lined up. There it goes. And then waiting for the pop of the tabs going in. Yeah. Now our cable, yeah, see you can pull on that and it's crimped pretty well in there. You can kind of see, like I'm putting tension on the cable and it's not moving at all in there. So it's a pretty nice place to kind of stick it out. We'll put the CD reader in next. You can rest it on the front while you insert. You just apply a little bit of, I kind of wobbled it in, like got one side, and then from there was able to pivot the other side in, and then just kind of fully seat it. Now it's good. We'll put the screws in for the CD drive. And I guess we can put this back in. This is probably going to be pretty easy for some of you guys to forget. and it seats like that, and then the antenna goes in there. Pop one on. Pretty sure anyways. Actually, it might not be the case, but I'll wait on that. Go ahead and screw this one in on the bottom. So it goes on like this. This sort of L shape at the top goes over that. Bottom goes in first, kind of channels into this the groove or lip on the bottom cover, and then you can lay it down flush against the screw holes on the casing on the side. And again, these 6 holes in the middle require these long screws because they screw into the, I don't know, the rectifiers and the other sort of power components in there that require cooling, I suppose. I'm sure it's totally fine as long as you just take care, know where all the screws go. Let's do the faceplate. So again, you've got this little metal flange or whatever that, so you have to kind of slide this in, this side in first, position that side first. I was just above the tab. I have to move it down a little bit so that it lines up and then it comes through. And then it's just the plugs that plug it into the actual radio PCB behind. Make sure it's nice and tight. Oh, that definitely needed a bit more attention. And top cover. But this doesn't screw into anything on the top cover, so I'm going to go ahead and insert that screw now because I think it's the top cover obscures it a little bit, so I won't be able to screw it in after I put it on. Okay, now we can continue with the top cover, making sure that these are all lined up and that these are tabs popping in. That lines up, that lines up. There we go. I think the analog stick was... Yeah, okay. I believe, guys, that we are finished. And that is a complete stock stereo with an aux mod. Alright, so I've now covered the aux cord end in a bunch of electrical tape to kind of just seal it all up and make it nice and isolated. So now we're going to go ahead and head out there and test it in the Jeep. Straight replace it from when I pulled it out earlier, because I mean, we did verify that it worked. Hopefully we didn't ruin it. Ground and the antenna. Okay, we're going in the right hole. Yeah, there we go. We'll plug that all the way in. We're not going to obviously screw it all back together yet. We're testing it. We're just testing it. Ah, yes. So how I had this laid out is I would kind of tuck it on the bottom here, just below the vents. When the dash bit covers it, it'll just kind of go over when it seats against the foam, the insulating foam. So this will just be inside. It will be non-visible. And then I just drape it right out here so that it's outside the steering column. That way I can plug it into my aux mod. Now we're not going to plug this in yet because we want to test and make sure just the radio element of it works. If there's no signal coming from this aux cord, it'll just function like a normal radio. It just picks up everything from whatever source, the cassette deck, the CD, or the AM/FM radio. However, if you plug something in, then it essentially overrides whatever the radio is doing. It's a little bit hokey, right? There's nothing official or some cool secret feature of the stereo that lets you like press 2 buttons or anything like that. It's just overriding the audio signal from the stereo itself. So now that that's laid out, let's just go ahead and fire up the car and make sure our stereo works. So when I plug this in, it should just go silent with a pop. Yep. That is exactly how it's supposed to work. Connect my phone. I mean, my phone should already be connected. Cool. That's it. I mean, to prove it. verify that you wired up the left and right correctly. It works! Yeah, I hope you guys benefited from that video. I hope if you decide to attempt the mod yourself, I wish you the best of luck and hope that it goes smoothly for you. Please feel free to give me some feedback in the comments. I mean, I understand that my soldering, obviously. If anybody who is an expert or knows quite a bit more about soldering can offer their advice in the comments, please do that, because that would definitely help out some of the people watching this video. Yeah, thanks for watching.